Hello and good morning. Thank you for joining us for Adventure Await, creating your first Dungeon and Dragon character with Kira Maddox. Excuse me. Now, I just want to do a quick little plug to make sure to check out our Facebook page and YouTube channel on Saturday, August 21st for a lineup of speakers, crafts, and a virtual Dungeons and Dragon game for you to play. For more information, make sure to visit fandemicon.com. I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, Kira Maddox. Kira has been an avid D&D player for years, bringing more than 15 characters to life. Welcome, Kira.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Okay, so I'm just going to jump right into the presentation. Give me 1 second to share my screen. All right, can everybody see? It should be kind of a back end of version of Fandemicon right now.
No.
Okay, what about now?
Oh, there we go. 1 second. There we go.
Okay, and can you see my Adventure Awaits presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome.
Take it away.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so the first kind of step to making your first Dungeons and Dragons character is kind of thinking about who you want to be. This doesn't have to be anything super in-depth, but it is partially a role-playing game, so thinking about how your character got to where they are. Maybe they're a farmer who decided to start a new path in life. Maybe they worked for the city guard and are investigating something in the area. Kind of just thinking about who your character is, what you want to be doing in this world, and how you got here. And starting with that, we're going to talk a little bit about race, character races, and backgrounds. Now, there are a ton of different races in Dungeons & Dragons, as well as background information for your characters. They're in the player's handbook, and then there also are more in supplemental books. So I'm not going to go through them in super detail, just kind of an overview. They help you, they give extra bonuses and things like that to your characters. For example, an elf is very lithe, very quick on their feet, so they might get a little bit of a bonus when it comes to being dexterous. And for example, a dragonborn, which is a dragon person, might have a special feature like a breath weapon where they can blow fire or something like that. Similar to the backgrounds, each one sort of gives you a little bonus. So if you're an alkalite and you are a priest, maybe you have a little bit of an upper hand when it comes to finding out information that might have to do with religion or a certain temple or something of that nature. Next, you're going to start thinking about what class you want to be. And this is kind of the bread and butter of Dungeons and Dragons. It determines kind of what you do in battle, who you are playing the game. And the first one we're going to start with is the Barbarian. The Barbarian is a melee-based character that usually don't wear armor, are kind of more in tune with nature and themselves. And their key feature is called Rage. And what Rage helps you do is it halves damage that you take. So if you're fighting somebody and say they go to hit you and they're going to do 10 points of damage because you're raging, it would only do half. It also helps you get a couple of bonuses to attacks and damage and things like that. I am also going to go through these a little bit quick just because there are a bunch and it's kind of easier to just do it one-on-one with the question answer part. This will just help you get a little overview of everything and kind of give you a direction to look for more information. So the next class we have is the Bard character. This is a spellcaster class, and something I always say to people is if it's your first character in Dungeons & Dragons, spellcasters tend to be a little bit more difficult just because they have a little bit more to keep track of with the number of spells they have, what different spells can do. That's not saying you can't be one. Totally up to you if you're familiar with it or have experience playing other video games or tabletop games. Or if you just want to see if you can do it, go for it. Totally up to you. It's your character. It's your world. You can do whatever you want. But a bard's kind of like the musical character. They're the person you meet on the side of the road with a guitar and maybe a couple magical tricks up their sleeve. And their key feature is called bardic inspiration. And that helps you help your allies. Maybe they're trying to persuade someone to come give you some more information and you give a little sing, a little song, maybe a little strum of your guitar, and suddenly they think a little bit better of themselves, have a little bit more confidence. That gives them a bonus to kind of do whatever it is that they're trying to do in the game and in the world. Next we have is the Cleric. Cleric is another caster class, more of a warrior, but in service to some sort of god or deity, of which, again, there's a ton of deities and things in Dungeons and Dragons for all sorts of different paths and religions and good, evil, all across the board. So a lot of role play aspect, a lot of character development can come in with being a cleric. And their key feature is called Channel Divinity. One of them helps you turn undead creatures. So if you're fighting a bunch of skeletons, you're really going to want someone who's a cleric in your party or something like that. And the other one is based on your god and kind of what kind of cleric you are, but they're little buffs that you get in game that are custom to your character, which is really cool. Next, we have the Druid. This is, I would say, one of the more iconic sort of characters, just because their key feature is called Wild Shape. So as you can see in this picture here, and this is from the official Dungeons and Dragons player handbook, Druid can change their shape into various different beasts, and all of those creatures have their own special abilities. So you could be fighting someone face to face, and suddenly you turn into a wolf, for example, and now you're running with your pack and getting, bonuses because you're near your friends. Or maybe you turn into a giant toad, and giant toads can gobble people up and hold them and grapple them and things like that. So a lot of different utility, super fun class. Like I said, a caster, very at one with nature again. A fighter. A fighter is an all-around character, very versatile. You can kind of do whatever you want here, but their main thing is that they're usually a frontliner, and they get action surge. And what that means is they can take multiple attacks in a turn on top of what, some other classes that also get to attack more than once can do. So super fun. Definitely someone who kind of controls the battlefield. That's sort of what their bread and butter is. Maybe they were the soldier character or the guard or a gladiator or something like that. Again, another melee-based character as well. A monk is a martial artist. They mostly use their fists or maybe a staff. They have a lot of out-of-combat abilities as well, where they can run up walls, slow fall, things like that. Their key ability is called key points, where you get a certain number of points per day, and you can use them and spend your points to do extra little things, whether it's have a bonus to maybe dodging out of the way of something or getting to attack a couple extra times, or maybe at higher levels, you might try and stun somebody that you're fighting or something like that. But a very, wise sort of like, I guess, almost like the ninja headcanon is what the monk is. Next, we have our Paladin. A Paladin is very similar to the Cleric in that they are another kind of holy fighter, kind of have a set moral path. And the thing about Dungeons and Dragons as well is, even if you choose to be a Paladin or a Cleric or something like that, even if you don't want to pick a specific god or path like that to follow, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. It could just be a set moral code that you have for your own person that you follow. Like, I will not steal from people. It's a pretty basic one, but you feel very strongly about that. You won't do it. Maybe you're not really happy to have other people around you do that kind of thing. You have your own set thing that you follow. Their key feature, they also have a channel divinity like the Cleric, but they also have Divine Strike, which again is another special to them damage boost. I personally play a lot of Paladins. I think they're super fun because they are, as you can see from the photo, very heavily armored, hard to hit, and out of game, very charismatic, good at talking to people, good at persuading. So is the Bard and a few other characters as well. Up next is the Ranger. This is another quintessential fantasy class, I would say. Think of your Legolas type characters, you know what I mean? Out in the wilderness, scouting, maybe doing some hunting, either has a bow and arrow or maybe some daggers, very aloof type of person. Their key feature is called Favorite Enemy. And I'll also mention that they got a huge restructuring in one of the latest Dungeons and Dragons supplemental books. So that was super fun for everybody who liked Rangers. So they have a couple new features, a couple new reworks to make their play style a little bit more well-rounded. Because Favorite Enemy, for example, the original one, you pick a specific type of person or enemy, whether it's a goblin or a dragon or something like that, and you get bonuses to find and know information about them and that kind of thing. But if your game happens to not have those, it kind of hit a little bit of a wall. So the new one is, like I said, a lot more well-balanced, well-rounded, very cool. This is going to be maybe your scout, maybe the person that helps you walk through the woods quietly, pointing out sticks and things not to step onto the rest of your group, that type of person. Next up, you have your rogue. This is pretty straightforward as well. Just by looking at the picture, you can kind of tell what this person's about. They are the sneaky one. They're the ones hiding in the shadows, maybe getting information from people, maybe, doing some eavesdropping, that type of thing to kind of help your party out. Their key feature is called Sneak Attack, where they get an extra D6, which is just the normal 6-sided cube die that we're all familiar with from various other games throughout our lives, to their damage. And that goes up as they level up. So by the time you're level 5 or 6 and up, it goes up to level 20, you're doing a ton of burst damage right in the front lines. But that's kind of the rogue's thing. They go in, they do a ton of damage, they get out because they're just in leathers and kind of sneaky. Sneak attacks. Next up, we have our Sorcerer. They are a spellcaster whose magical abilities kind of come from their bloodline. So like Druids get their magic kind of from the earth, and Clerics get it from a god, sort of. Sorcerers get it, maybe there was a dragon way far back in their family's history and they have draconic bloodlines, or maybe they were exposed to some sort of magical fissure or a different plane or something, and it changed them and gave them magical powers. And their key feature is called sorcery points. It's very similar to the monk's key points, where you get a certain number of points and you can spend them to do different specialized things. Maybe you have a spell and you can, instead of targeting one person, now you can target 2. So if you have, for example, charm person, where you can charm somebody to be your friend and get them to sort of do what you want them to do, an NPC, maybe now you can cast that on 2 guards instead of 1 guard. Or if your spell is supposed to only go as far as 10 feet from you, maybe you can double it, things like that. Different meta magic abilities is what they're called. Next up, we have the Warlock. This is a caster, and their power kind of comes from having a certain pact or agreement with some sort of otherworldly being. Maybe it's an archfey from a different plane, or a different type of god, or a sea god, or something like that. Similar to the Cleric, but more of a quid pro quo type of situation going on with the Warlock. Their key feature is called Eldritch Invocations. And again, it's just a few extra spells and things that they get to do at will. For example, when I play Warlock, I always like to take Mask of Many Faces, which lets you disguise yourself at will. So 1 second, I'm standing there looking like my regular wood elf character, and the next second, I've changed my face and I look like a blonde-haired human barmaid, maybe, or something like that, And there's a bunch of different ones, all with different situational abilities, utility, maybe damage, depends on what you're looking for. And finally, we have our Wizard. Wizard, again, is pretty straightforward. They're a caster who kind of gets their knowledge from reading books, scrolls. You have a spell book, very Harry Potter-esque type of person. Can be on their own. Maybe you belong to a wizard's guild of some sort. That type. Search for knowledge type of person. Their key feature is called Arcane Recovery. And that means that they get to get some of their spells back a little bit faster than some of the other classes. And I'll kind of go into that a little bit when we look at the actual character sheet. In addition to this, you also get to pick a specific school of magic that you're familiar with, whether it be evocation, conjuration, abjuration. I know those all sound like I'm making up languages. But it gives you, different buffs and different things that you can do based on your specialization and what type of magic you focus on. So that was a little bit about the actual character classes. Now we're going to go into, I guess, the more difficult part, which is the math behind Dungeons and Dragons. So everything that you want to do in the game is based on your ability scores. These are strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. So say you want to persuade somebody to come help you with something or give you more information about something you're looking for. You might make a persuasion check, which would be based on your charisma. Or maybe you're trying to figure out what this arcane sigil means that's on the ground. That would be an intelligence check, an arcana check. Maybe you're trying to jump over a big crack in the ground, and you don't want to go around. You just want to try and jump right over it. That would be based on your dexterity and your acrobatics. So the question is, how do you come up with these scores? Well, for most things in Dungeons & Dragons, at least in 5th edition, which is the standard one right now, you use what's called a standard array. These are your base numbers, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And each of them kind of shows here which what your actual bonus is and what those numbers mean. And again, this will come into play a little bit more when we get into the character sheet portion. But this is just to help so that way, there's things that you're really good at, things that you're kind of middle of the road at, and things that maybe aren't really your forte. And that's okay. And just because something's not necessarily your forte doesn't mean you can't do it. This is a game about fun. So say you put that 8 into your charisma and you have a -1 and you go and try and charm the pants off of somebody. You go try and tell the guard to just let you into the castle because you have important business and you're not very good at it. That's still fun. It's still hilarious. It's still a great time. And that's really what the core of Dungeons & Dragons is at the heart. It's just having fun with your friends, having a good time, exploring the world, and that kind of thing. So now we're going to take a look at the character sheet. And hopefully this will help things come into play a bit more. Can you all see my cursor here?
Yes.
Okay. I was going to say I can't hear anything. Okay. So like I said, we're going to start over here at the left. This is sort of where those ability scores come into play. Now, just like I said before, strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. This is where you're going to decide where you want to put your points. And this is really up to you, but it's also, based on what your character class is. So this character, Aislinn Dwenetier, she's actually a Wood Elf Ranger that I have played before. And like I said, the Ranger, thinking Legolas, she has a longbow. She's a scout. She's very sneaky, that type of thing. So I wanted to make sure that she had a very high dexterity, so she could do all of that kind of stuff that I wanted her to do well. So I put my base, my top number, that 15 in here. And then I got a +2 for being an elf. So that ties back into the thing we talked about in the beginning with picking your race and how each race has different abilities and bonuses. Elves get a plus to the dexterity. So that bumped me up to a total of 17. And that actually brought me to a +3 here. So that means when I'm trying to do stuff with my dexterity, like I said, jump over a giant crack on the ground or do some parkour moves off of some buildings in the city to not be seen. This is what we're going to kind of look at in our acrobatics here, our dexterity. The next one I put up for her was wisdom, because her spells, the Rangers do get a few spells, is based off of wisdom. And this is where I put my 13, and I got a +1 for being a wood elf specifically. So that bumped that up. You see, I didn't make her very smart. She has an 8 in intelligence, a -1. I figured, she's not really that kind of person. She's not going to be the type that's really involved in magic and the arcane or history or anything like that. So I don't really need her to have this. But again, that doesn't mean that I can't try. You could always roll and see what happens. It's all up to the dice. These are your skills. I said each thing that you want to do in the game is usually tied into a skill of some sort or a saving throw. So like I said, if you are an acolyte background and you saw a temple to some mysterious god and you want to ask your dungeon master, your game master, as an acolyte, have I heard anything about this god? Do I know anything about them or their followers? You might be asked to make a religion check, which would be here. Maybe you're in a tavern and you want to get on everybody's good side and you're a bard and you say, hey, I want to go up in front of everybody and perform a song and dance and just put on a show and see what happens. See if I can get the crowd on my side. That would be a performance check. So you would roll and add whatever your ability modifiers are to that. And these are things that you can kind of figure out ahead of time. And this sheet, again, I know it's kind of a lot, but this is definitely something that you have with you every time that you're playing to look at and reference. Nobody, I don't think, plays this game without looking back at their character sheet. So if you're reading it and it's taking you a little bit to figure out where things are, to figure out the math because it's your first time playing, that's totally understandable. Everybody does that. If you move back up to the top, you can see this part has a little bit more to do with combat. This is your armor class, which for me is a 14. As a ranger, I started off wearing leather armors, which I have down here. And the leather armor means you get an 11 plus whatever your dexterity bonus is. I gave my character a high dexterity on purpose. That helped me boost this up. And what this means is if you're in combat and somebody tries to hit you, they have to get 14 or above to actually hit you. Otherwise, if it's below that, you dodge out of the way and you don't take any damage. Everything's good. Your initiative determines when you go in the turn order, who goes first, who goes second, third, fourth, etc. This is a little bonus that you get to whatever you roll. Your speed is how far you can move in a turn. I can move 35 feet as a wood elf. Your hit points, this is how much health you have. Temporary hit points, sometimes you get these during the game, but I wouldn't worry too much about them. Hit die, these mostly help if you're playing a character that you know is going to be a character that you play over and over again. So I'm level 1, so it's just 1. But if you go up, it's level 2, 3, 4, etc. And this is how you figure out how many extra hit points you get as you level up and get stronger. Death saves, hopefully nobody even has to deal with these. This is if your character is knocked unconscious and it's to see if you get back up or if somebody has to come save you. Very stressful. Down here, this is where you will put your attacks and maybe if you have a couple of go-to spells. You can see here I have a longbow and a short sword, and these are my attack bonuses. These are based off of your main attack ability. So for the longbow and the short sword, again, it was dexterity. Things like a great axe or a great maul or something like that might be strength-based. And then your damage, how much damage you do and what type it is. This comes into play a little bit because, back like the Barbarian, for example, that I said takes half damage from certain things when they're raging. That only applies to certain types of damage here. So that sometimes that comes into play. Your dungeon master might ask you the damage type. Down here is where we keep track of your equipment. You don't usually have a ton of stuff going on in here. I have my basic stuff that I start with, my starter items, and a little bit of starter gold here. If you want to buy things that's based on gold. Over here, you have your proficiencies in languages. Languages are another thing that come in from mostly your race. I think some of the backgrounds allow you to pick a new language as well. So this character, as a wood elf, speaks Common and Elvish. She's also proficient in a few different types of armor and shields, a few different types of weapons, and a few different types of tools based on my background. This is all stuff that you'll just read through in the player's handbook, and it'll tell you pretty straightforward and explicitly these are the things that you're good with. Up here, this is sort of a role play quick guide. I don't always use this. Sometimes I'm the type of person that kind of likes my character's personality to unfold as I'm playing the game. Sometimes, depending on who I'm playing with, I don't put a lot of stock in their personality. Sometimes it's just me and how I would respond, which is fine. It's up to you and how you want to play. Some people I know get really into this part. So you have personality traits, ideals, any bonds that they might have, and maybe any flaws that you want to keep tabs on. So for example, I made Aislinn a little bit wasteful with her money, likes fancy things. So I knew if we were ever going to a shop, I was going to have her buy any little bauble or gadget that she could get her hands on, anything shiny, as her character flaw. Down here, we have our features and traits, and this is where when we talked about key features for each character class, this is where you would write them down. But you also get features from your race as well as your background. So for example, as a wood elf, you get Mask of the Wild. So you can attempt to hide even if you're only lightly obscured by maybe a tree or some heavy rain or snow or something like that. Whereas most people would have to be, behind a tree trunk or something clearly hidden, maybe a giant boulder. You can kind of use the leaves and the heavy rain to your advantage to kind of hide in. Same thing with backgrounds. They will also give you features. So this is just a place to kind of jot them down so you don't have to keep going back to the book. There is normally a second page here. I didn't include it because it is a lot of role play based things. It's where you can write down your character's backstory a little bit. If you have a drawing of your character that you did, you could put it there if they're part of any sort of guild. And then just more space for more features because you will get more of these as your character levels up. And the final page is the spell sheet page. Now, not everybody will use this. Not all of the characters have spells, but this is where you would write them down. You have different spell slots, different spell levels. So weaker spells are level 1, level 2, level 3, and they kind of go up in strength as you go up. And you get a certain number a day. And until you normally have to go to sleep at night, that's when you kind of regain all your health, all your expended arcane power, all that kind of stuff. That's why I said the wizard with arcane recovery, they get theirs a little faster. They can recover some of them just with a quick short rest, quick half-hour breather. They can get back at least a few of these spell slots. Warlocks can also do that as well, but they have fewer spell slots and they have to cast them kind of big. It's a very specific warlock thing. Cantrips are spells that you will have all the time. So when you have run out of spell slots for the day, you can always rely on your cantrips that are always just at your disposal. And up here, you will write down your spellcasting ability. Rangers go off of wisdom. But for example, the wizard is intelligence-based because they're reading, so it's a different kind of element. Your spell save DC, which is what other people would have to beat to not have to have the effects of your spell go off, and if you have any attack bonus to hit or something of that nature. And yeah, that is pretty much a quick guide to the classes and races and a little bit on the character sheet. I know I did kind of go through it a little bit fast. So if there are any questions, you can ask them now. I only have this one thing up, so I'll have to move back over to the Fandemicon page to see if any questions were put in the chat. But I also included my email address because I know that sometimes, maybe you don't have a question right now. I'm that type of person. Or maybe I don't have a question during the presentation, but maybe after thinking it over, I think of something, or maybe I'm going through the player's handbook and something's confusing me, or I can't remember what the math is on something, feel free to send me an email. Feel free to send me your character sheet if you want me to look it over, anything like that. Super happy to help out. So thanks. I think that is pretty much it from my end here. Are there any questions in the chat? Because otherwise I'll have to switch back over to share my screen with the other one. So I think I'm just going to leave this here.
There are no questions that I see. Just a comment. I got that it's a great topic, which thank you very much. We think so too.
Yeah, it's a super fun game. I'm glad it seems to be getting so much more popularity lately, especially I think during the shutdown, because it's a game that you can play in person, or like with Fandemicon, you can play it online. So super great, super good for social distancing fun. It's super imaginative, and I'm glad to see more people are getting interested in it.
It's a very fun game. I got to play with your friends, and got just have a great fun time.
Kira, thank you so much for joining us this morning and going through that. It was really informative. We really appreciate you helping us out. I also want to say to everybody else who's watching, thanks for joining us as well. And make sure to check us out back here Saturday, August 21st from 10 to 4 for our virtual Fandemicon. If you want any more information, fandemicon.com gives you the entire list of things we're doing that day and how to participate. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.